I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen bee.
For nearly 3 decades, one instruction remained buried beneath palace silence. It was not written for the public, debated by courtiers, or announced through official channels. It was spoken by Diana, in a voice so controlled that the aide receiving it never forgot a single word. Camilla was never to enter the blue sitting room at Kensington Palace, not during Diana's lifetime, not after her death, and not under any circumstances. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Eleanor Whitcomb broke her silence during a private recorded interview, and when she placed a small leather diary on the table, her hands trembled. The former palace aide had carried the secret for years. Now she explained why Diana trusted her with one duty above all others: protect the blue sitting room. The chamber sat beside the princess's private study at Kensington Palace, the London residence where she lived with William and Harry. It was not ceremonial. It held letters, family photographs, handwritten reflections, and recordings never meant for courtiers or anyone shaping the palace version of her life. Diana believed too much had already been taken from her. Eleanor remembered when Camilla's name entered the conversation. Diana stood near the fireplace, gripping the back of a chair until her fingers whitened. She did not shout. She did not break down. Instead, the princess said the room contained memories belonging to her sons, and no one who had entered her marriage was ever to enter that space. Then came the proof. Eleanor opened the diary to a dated entry. 4 words stood alone: Mrs. Parker Bowles not to enter. Beneath them sat Diana's handwritten initial. The notation turned an emotional request into a documented household command, meaning senior staff were expected to enforce it as palace procedure for decades afterward. But the room protected more than memories. Inside a locked writing box rested a sealed cream envelope bearing only 2 names: William and Harry. Eleanor said Diana warned her that Camilla must never see its contents. The future king and his brother were meant to receive it when the time was right, not when the palace found it convenient. That warning would soon be tested. Years before Diana's death, Camilla arrived at Kensington Palace and moved toward the forbidden corridor herself. Eleanor saw the princess leave another conversation, step into her path, and face the woman she had ordered kept outside. To understand why Diana defended that doorway with such finality, the people standing on either side of it must first be understood not as royal symbols, but as wounded human beings. The Forbidden Room was never truly about furniture, photographs, or locked drawers. It was about 3 people trapped inside a conflict that had already consumed a marriage. Diana saw the chamber as the last place where she could remain a mother rather than a royal wife under observation. Camilla saw the closed door as proof that part of Charles would always remain beyond her reach. And Charles understood why neither woman would retreat. Diana returned to the blue sitting room after public engagements that had demanded smiles she no longer felt. Eleanor Whitcomb remembered her slipping off her shoes, lowering herself beside William, and helping him arrange family photographs into careful piles. Harry searched through a wooden box of keepsakes, asking questions only a child could ask, while his mother answered with patience. In that room, she was not performing for the monarchy. She was simply protecting the small, private world she still had with her sons. Camilla understood exactly why that mattered. The chamber held memories of Charles as a husband and father, memories created before her place in his life could be acknowledged. The prohibition did more than keep her outside a room. It reminded her that part of his past would always belong to Diana, and no title, marriage, or palace acceptance could erase it. Charles felt the pressure from both sides. During one private conversation, Diana explained the ban and asked him to promise that Camilla would never be allowed inside. He walked toward the window, pressed 2 fingers against the glass, and said nothing. His silence answered more cruelly than refusal. Diana watched him avoid the choice, and the old feeling returned. Even when she asked for one protected space, she still stood alone. Later, she told Eleanor that humiliation directed at her was survivable. What she could not accept was William and Harry having their private emotions pulled into the same struggle. The aide watched sadness harden into determination. Then another detail surfaced. Camilla had already asked a household employee what Diana kept inside. The question moved quickly through the staff and reached the princess within hours. Soon after, Diana learned that Charles had once entered the room searching for personal letters she had removed from their shared apartments. Nothing was taken, but the trust was gone. Words were no longer enough. Eleanor later identified one Kensington Palace reception as the turning point. Camilla arrived unexpectedly, left the main gathering, and began moving toward the forbidden corridor. The warning had existed in words, but on that reception afternoon, Diana was forced to turn it into an action no one inside the palace could dismiss. Every palace conflict has a point of no return, a second when careful smiles collapse and private resentment becomes impossible to conceal. For Diana, that moment came during a charitable reception at Kensington Palace. Music drifted through the staterooms, guests moved beneath chandeliers, and Charles spoke warmly with donors. Then Eleanor noticed Camilla leaving the reception alone. She was not heading toward the exit. She was walking directly toward the corridor containing Diana's private blue sitting room. Camilla moved away from the reception supporting children's charities without an escort, leaving behind the polite conversations and carefully controlled atmosphere. The gathering mattered deeply to Diana, because it reflected the public work she had built around vulnerable children. Yet while the princess remained with guests, the woman at the center of her private pain was approaching the one place she had forbidden her to enter. Eleanor Whitcomb was carrying a bundle of correspondence when she saw Camilla stop before the blue-painted door. The former palace aide understood the danger immediately. She placed the letters on a side table and hurried back through the adjoining rooms, knowing that hesitation could turn suspicion into violation. Diana was speaking to a donor when Eleanor delivered the warning. She ended the conversation with a brief apology and walked away without explaining why. Her expression remained calm, but one hand tightened around her bracelet. The princess had spent years absorbing humiliation in silence. This time, she would not remain still. Camilla's fingers reached the brass handle just as Diana entered the corridor. "That room is private," the princess said. Camilla replied that she was only looking for Charles, but the excuse carried its own insult. Diana knew the king's heir was still speaking with donors elsewhere. More importantly, she knew questions had already been asked about the letters hidden inside. Diana confronted her directly. She said staff had repeated Camilla's inquiries and warned that nothing in the chamber belonged to her. For one brief moment, Camilla's expression changed. Eleanor saw surprise give way to anger, and that reaction confirmed what Diana had feared. The interest in the room had been real. The princess stepped between Camilla and the doorway. She removed the key from her pocket, locked the chamber, and closed her fist around it. Then she instructed Eleanor to place the exclusion into the household orders, the written rules senior staff were required to enforce. Charles arrived moments later and found both women facing each other in silence. Camilla demanded that he correct the humiliation. Diana said nothing. She simply waited. The door had been locked, but the deeper confrontation had only begun, because Charles now had to answer the question he had avoided for years. Whose boundary would he defend? Charles arrived expecting another private disagreement he could soften with careful language. Instead, he found Diana standing before a locked door, Camilla demanding recognition, and an aide frozen several steps away. There would be no graceful retreat. Diana had drawn a boundary in the heart of Kensington Palace, and Camilla wanted the future king to erase it. His response would wound one woman, embolden another, and permanently alter the meaning of that room. Charles asked Eleanor Whitcomb to leave, but Diana stopped her before she could move. The princess said the aide must remain, because she would be responsible for enforcing the order. That single decision changed the confrontation. Camilla was no longer facing a private objection. She was watching Diana turn the ban into palace procedure, meaning a rule that household staff would be expected to follow. Camilla rejected the restriction at once. She insisted she had no intention of searching through anyone's belongings and called the entire scene theatrical. As a guest invited by Charles, she argued, she should not be treated like an intruder in a palace corridor. Her voice remained controlled, but the anger beneath it was unmistakable. Diana answered without shouting. She said the room contained the private lives of William and Harry, not material for palace curiosity. Then she told Camilla that enough space had already been taken from her marriage. She moved a chair away from the doorway and stood directly in front of it, making clear that no one would pass without going through her first. Charles tried to calm the situation, but his words made it worse. He told Diana she was overreacting. The princess stared at him for several long seconds. Hurt replaced anger, then hardened into disbelief. She asked whether protecting one room for her children had now become unreasonable, simply because Camilla disliked being refused. Then Diana revealed what she knew. She repeated the exact question Camilla had asked a staff member about the locked writing box. The queen consort turned sharply toward Charles, stunned that her enquiry had reached Diana. That reaction told everyone enough. Camilla walked away first. Charles remained behind and set his cufflinks case on a console. He told Diana he would instruct his staff not to approach the blue sitting room. It was not an apology. It was not loyalty. But it was surrender. Later, Eleanor saw Camilla near the palace entrance. Before leaving, she told Charles that a rule made in anger should not be allowed to govern the future. Camilla had been stopped at the threshold, yet the true power of Diana's order would depend on whether Charles treated it as a temporary concession or a permanent command. Royal power does not always arrive through proclamations. Sometimes it exists in a key removed from a ring, a name crossed from an access list, or an aide willing to say no when a more powerful person approaches. After the confrontation, Diana understood that emotion alone would not protect the blue sitting room. She needed a system. Eleanor became its guardian, Charles became its reluctant authority, and senior staff were forced to choose whether Diana's command would outlive the argument. Eleanor Whitcomb formalized the restriction the following morning. She wrote that no one could enter the chamber without Diana's personal approval, then placed the note inside the household security file. That file was the official record used by palace staff to control access to private rooms. A copy also went to the senior equerry, the royal officer responsible for coordinating the household around the family's private apartments. Diana distributed control with equal care. She kept one key herself and handed another to Eleanor. A third was sealed inside an envelope and placed with the palace superintendent, the official responsible for maintaining the residence. Charles received written notice that no duplicate could be made without direct authorization. The arrangement meant that influence, rank, and private persuasion could no longer open the door. Eleanor soon discovered the cost of loyalty. A senior courtier summoned her and advised her to remove Camilla's name from the instruction. He warned that direct wording could embarrass Charles and create problems far beyond Kensington Palace. Eleanor felt fear rise in her chest, but she refused. Diana had been precise. Changing the language would change the command. Charles then faced the order at his desk. He read it once, placed his pen down, and remained silent. Signing would give official weight to Diana's distrust. Refusing would reveal that he cared more about protecting Camilla from embarrassment than protecting William and Harry's privacy. He finally signed, but not before making one alteration. Charles replaced the phrase, "during the princess's residence," with, "until released by the princess in writing." The change gave the ban indefinite force. No courtier, advisor, or future verbal instruction could quietly cancel it. Diana later went further. Eleanor revealed in her recorded account that the princess attached a private memorandum, a written statement of final wishes, declaring that control would pass to William when he reached adulthood if she died. It would not pass to Charles. It would never pass to Camilla. Then tragedy came. Palace officials gathered to decide what should happen to Diana's private rooms, and Camilla's name entered the discussion once again. Diana was gone, but the instruction remained, and the people gathered around Charles now had to decide whether death had weakened her command or made it sacred. After Diana's death, the blue sitting room ceased to be merely private. It became a chamber filled with absence. Her gloves remained near the writing desk. A half-finished note rested beneath a paperweight. Photographs of William and Harry stood exactly where she had placed them. Charles entered the adjoining corridor and stopped before the locked door, knowing that Diana's instructions still carried his signature. For the first time, the ban was no longer an argument. It was an inheritance. Palace administrators soon began cataloging Diana's possessions, recording what should be preserved, transferred, or returned to her family. When they requested access to the blue sitting room, Eleanor Whitcomb produced the private memorandum. It stated that authority over the chamber would pass to William when he reached adulthood. Until then, no one could enter without strict supervision. Eleanor kept the operational key. Charles accepted responsibility for ensuring that nothing disappeared, moved, or quietly changed. The arrangement was not simply administrative. It mattered because the room contained the private history of two grieving sons, and any decision made without them would repeat the loss of control Diana had feared. Charles entered the outer study with Eleanor several days later. He identified family documents, paused over photographs, and answered questions in a voice stripped of certainty. When he reached the locked inner door, he placed one hand against it. For a moment, the man who had once resisted Diana's demand seemed ready to enter. He withdrew his hand. Camilla learned soon afterward that the instruction remained active. During a private conversation, she sat without speaking and removed one glove finger by finger. Then she asked Charles whether he truly intended to honor a prohibition aimed specifically at her. Charles did not hide behind palace language. He said the chamber belonged to William and Harry's history, and that he would not overturn their mother's written wishes. The king's future wife heard more than a decision about access. She heard that Diana's boundary had survived death, and that Charles had chosen to defend it. Before the room was sealed, Eleanor entered alone to inspect the locked writing box. The cream envelope remained untouched. Beside it lay a short note from Diana, instructing William to read the letter only when he felt ready, not when duty demanded it. Years passed before that moment arrived. An adult William eventually summoned Eleanor for a private meeting. He placed Diana's memorandum on the table, rested his hand beside it, and said he wanted to enter the room alone. But before taking the key, he needed the truth. The order had survived Diana, but its meaning could no longer remain hidden once William asked the one person who had witnessed its creation to tell him everything. There were no courtiers in the room when William finally asked for the truth. No advisors, no official minutes, and no polished palace language. Only the prince, the former Aide, and Diana's handwritten instruction between them. Eleanor had spent years protecting the secret because she believed silence honored the princess. But William no longer wanted protection. He wanted understanding. When he asked whether the ban had been driven by jealousy or fear, Eleanor gave him an answer he was not prepared to hear. William received Eleanor Whitcomb in a small sitting room with no staff present. He closed the door himself, then placed Diana's access memorandum beside the worn leather diary. The document was a written order controlling who could enter the blue sitting room, and its meaning now rested with the son it had been created to protect. Eleanor began with the Kensington confrontation. She described Camilla reaching for the handle, Diana stepping into her path, and Charles arriving after the moment had already become impossible to undo. The former Aide did not soften the humiliation. She explained how the princess had been forced to defend her private life in front of the very people who had helped make it feel unsafe. William listened without interrupting. He admitted that Camilla had later become part of his father's life, and that the family had spent years trying to build a workable peace. Yet he could not ignore the deeper truth. Diana had not created the order to protect jewelry or private gossip. She had created it because the room contained the emotional history of William and Harry. Eleanor then revealed what Diana feared most. The princess believed her sons might one day be pressured to rewrite their childhood so others could feel forgiven. She worried their memories would be softened, corrected, or rearranged until pain became inconvenience and betrayal became misunderstanding. The blue sitting room preserved their past before the palace could reshape it. William took the brass key and walked to the forbidden door. He paused, then entered alone. Eleanor remained outside. She heard the writing box unlock, followed by several minutes of silence, so complete that she wondered whether he had left through another door. He finally read Diana's letter. She told him forgiveness belonged to him, but so did his memories. No one should enter the room merely to prove that the past had been erased or that peace required silence. When William emerged, his voice was controlled. The chamber would not remain frozen forever. Its contents would be preserved for the family, but Diana's exclusion order would stand during the final cataloging. William's decision transformed the room from a private secret into a question of public memory, and once Eleanor's diary became known, the world reacted with an intensity the palace could not contain. The revelation escaped palace walls in a single evening. By dawn, Diana's forbidden room was no longer a private family matter. Broadcasters reconstructed the confrontation. Newspapers printed images of Kensington Palace beside the words, "The door Camilla could never cross." Crowds gathered at the gates carrying photographs of the late princess. Yet behind the public noise, Camilla sat with the morning papers folded before her, confronting a humiliation she believed had been buried with Diana. A national broadcaster opened its evening program with Eleanor Whitcomb's diary entry enlarged, behind the presenter. The former Aide's documented account was described as proof that Diana had created one final boundary that years of palace reconciliation could not erase. The story no longer centered only on a locked room. It now raised a harsher question about whether the monarchy had ever fully respected the princess's private wishes. Palace officials responded with careful language. They confirmed that Diana's instructions concerning her personal possessions had been honored, but refused to discuss Camilla directly. That silence was meant to contain the crisis. Instead, it made the exclusion feel more real, because the palace would neither deny the order nor explain why the queen consort had been singled out. Camilla faced the front page at breakfast. The headline read, "Diana's Last No," beneath an image of the Kensington doorway. She folded the newspaper once, pushed it away, and asked to be left alone. For years, she had survived public resentment and private comparison. Now one closed room had returned all of it at once. William refused to turn that pain into triumph. Advisors offered him a statement presenting the prince as the defender of his mother's legacy, but he rejected it. Diana's suffering, he insisted, could not become a weapon against Camilla. Protecting the truth was one thing, celebrating another person's humiliation was something else. Then Eleanor released the strongest evidence yet, a photograph of the signed access instruction bearing Diana's initial and Charles's authorization. The king could no longer be separated from the decision. He had helped make the ban permanent. By sunset, hundreds had gathered outside Kensington Palace. One woman placed a blue ribbon beside Diana's photograph and left a handwritten card. Some doors protect a life, even after it ends. With pressure rising, Charles summoned William and Camilla to separate private meetings. He intended to decide what would happen to the chamber, its contents, and the order itself. The public had delivered its judgment in emotion, but the final verdict still belonged to the family forced to live with what stood behind Diana's locked door. Charles could have erased the instruction with a signature. William could have destroyed it in the name of family peace. Camilla could have demanded that the monarchy stop allowing Diana's memory to define her place. None of them did. When the final decision came, it was quieter than the confrontation that created the ban, but far more powerful. The blue sitting room would be catalogued, preserved, and closed. Camilla would never enter it. Diana's final boundary would remain intact. Charles met William privately and placed the final order between them. The document transferred Diana's papers, recordings, and personal correspondence into a protected family archive, a secure collection, controlled by her sons rather than the wider palace. The chamber itself could be restored, but everything carrying her private voice would remain under William and Harry's authority. The king signed without hesitation. The written ruling stated that anyone specifically excluded by Diana could not assist with cataloging or handling the collection. Camilla's name would not appear in any public announcement, yet the original memorandum remained attached. That mattered because silence could no longer erase the truth. The restriction had survived grief, marriage, changing titles, and decades of pressure. Charles then admitted what he had avoided for years. He told William that he signed Diana's original instruction because he knew too many of her boundaries had already been crossed. Overturning it now would repeat the same failure. The monarch could not repair the marriage, but he could finally respect the limit he had once struggled to defend. Camilla received the decision from Charles in private. She removed her glasses, remained silent, and said she would not ask again. Her answer was not forgiveness, and it was not reconciliation. It was acceptance. The queen consort understood that marrying the king had given her a place in the monarchy, but it had never given her ownership of Diana's memories. William refused to turn the room into a weapon against her. He explained that it would not become a shrine built on resentment. It would stand as proof that his mother's identity, motherhood, and private pain belonged to her, not to the institution that had surrounded her. Eleanor Whitcomb returned the old brass key during one final private meeting. The former aide placed it in William's palm, and he closed his hand around it. He thanked her for keeping Diana's promise. She left without looking back. Diana's ban was never revenge. It was the final defense of a woman who believed every other boundary had been crossed. Charles acknowledged his failure. Camilla accepted the limit of her position. William reclaimed his mother's memory. The blue sitting room remained closed because the monarchy finally understood Diana's demand. One part of her life could not be entered, rewritten, or taken away. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.